What's up guys, and welcome to another bogged vlog. It's been a while. Things have been happening in my life, some lifestyle changes. But I thought I'd come back with basically a positive message in this entry. Whilst I was kind of going about my life, I kind of had my own realization. As you know, if you watch any of my previous entries, I like to talk about what I learn, on my journey of self-actualization, you could say. I like to share that. Part of the reason I do these videos is because I like to try and teach about concepts and principles that basically bring awareness, to people. But at the same time, a lot of that comes from, my day-to-day experiences and, just things that I realize through that, right? But actually, aside from that, I also wanted to do, I had kind of the pleasure of having like a very chill few days recently, and and on top of the realization I had for this, from this, I also wanted to do a kind of like a motivational video, because I realized, a bit of background, if you don't know, I kind of really started to take this seriously, what I'm doing right now, around kind of like late 2013, right? If you watch, you can watch like some of my boat engine preachers videos, which, were my very first attempts at doing vlogs. And I also have a website, right? And I started off, with a very kind of passionate vision about, helping people and spreading a positive, inspirational message, right? That was kind of like the idea that I had. And then after that, it kind of branched off into like talking about, all kinds of different things. But like my initial kind of mission statement, you could say, was like to kind of like provide inspiration and motivation, because I myself was someone who was trying to break away from a lifestyle that I deemed, dissatisfactory. And I basically wanted to kind of, in a way, provide myself inspiration by giving inspiration to other people, right? So, and I haven't really done videos of that nature. I mean, generally speaking, my videos tend to be quite, I tend to like be passionate about what I'm talking about, so like it kind of comes off in my videos. But I thought I'd kind of like go back to basics and provide like a bit of a reboot in terms of like giving you guys a very motivational video. And well, in this video, really, I wanted to talk about, just pursuing your passion, right? And this actually goes deeper, as I'm gonna go into in a bit. But if there's anything that I really advocate, and espouse in my own life, it is really just to like follow your passion, right? And just go in the direction of what you love, right? And I feel that this is something that we always need to come back to. I feel it's something that's not really done enough. I mean, there's lots of inspirational content out there, or you can find inspiration anywhere. But I feel that after a while, like the kind of cynicism that comes from like just interaction with daily life means that that kind of a message, that kind of an inspirational, positive message, gets kind of pushed aside. Like it loses its value, as is the case with anything that is to do with like positivity. Really, like positivity is easily overwhelmed by negativity, right? So as you go into the world and you have to you have to be involved in it. You have to survive. You've grown up into an adult. You basically have to, like, you start to harden. Basically, you start to become a bit cynical. So, and really, like, I feel that, I wanted to just, restate that message of like, you should follow your passion and follow what you love, right? Even if you're already doing it, right? It's just to give you like a booster, of motivation, as to why, you should keep going. Because there's it's really easy, right, to become, cynical and, like negative, and be basically like slowly ground down by by people around you, by like the subliminal messages that you receive from various sources like the media, just like the state of society. So like you go out into the world and it's like kind of like you just like things like the kind of very subtle but insidious kind of negative thought patterns start to creep into your mind. Like, like you start to think like, what's the point? And like this is kind of the normal person's default thinking. So like, but like if you happen to be someone who has a vision for yourself and has a vision for the world, it's very easy once you get stuck into the real world, like to just look around you and be like, and start to think like, why am I bothering? Like it's like people, it's kind of coming to my attention that people don't really care. People don't take responsibility for their own lives. Like there are problems in society that could be so easily fixed with just a bit of the right mindset, basically. Like I wish, you start to think like, oh no, I wish people would like, like just open their eyes for a minute and just look around them and be like, like I would like for like, there's some of the stuff to change, I would like for, I believe that, I can contribute change by, just pausing for a minute and like kind of unplugging from the negativity, right? And basically, do all of the stuff that I talk about, basically. But, I guess there is a reason why, this kind of thing is quite rare, even though the idea of following your passion and, like, a better world and, inspiring visions like that, they appeal to anyone, really. Like, it takes a real pessimist to, like, and, like, unfortunately, there's quite a few of those in society. This is what I mean, right? And when I first wanted to do this video, it was actually a few days ago, and I've basically been back at the grind, and so like my energy's not quite in the same place. I knew that it would come to this, but anyway, I'm kind of all over the place because I haven't done an entry for a while. But like, yeah. So just to wrap this up in terms of the inspirational message thing, I'm sorry if it's not been too inspirational, but it's just, I guess my energy's not been in the right place. But honestly, it's just to tell you that, you should follow your passion. You should follow what you believe you should do in life. You should remember, the positive reasons for why we're doing whatever we're doing, right? Like there's so many people stuck in like lives that they don't like at all, life situations that they hate, just like with this kind of mentality that's just very, very like depressing, it's like very miserable, like the average person in society. And like, I don't know, this could be my own skewed perception, because I do live in a place that is very rife with that, honestly speaking. But like, like, and there's not a lot of like kind of like, people telling you, or like kind of like dialogue going where people like are saying, well, why do I want to do this, what I'm doing? Why do I want to become a musician? Or why do I want to become a politician? Just as an example. Why do I want to become a writer? Why do I want to do this work, which has the label attached of like, helping the world become better and improving society and like, encouraging, harmony and, that kind of thing. And, yeah, it's just follow your passion, because you're doing it for a good reason. Again, I kind of apologize, but I thought at least I'd be authentic, you know. I can't not be authentic. It's actually really difficult for me to be like inauthentic in these entries. But yeah, anyway, that's basically my message. I guess I can wrap it up by saying, you know, if you're kind of going through a similar journey as myself, you know, if you're doing something that you believe in, regardless of what other people think, you know, and you truly believe that, at the very least, it's something that you want to do for yourself in life, then, you know, never forget that it's, you know, just keep believing that it'll be worth it, right? Just purely based on, you know, the love that you feel towards that thing, right? But anyway, the kind of other side of this recent realization I had by having like a few days of rest to myself was that basically, yeah, it's going into some of my previous entries. So it's like an extension of some of my previous entries where I talk about, you know, consulting your feelings, and like, you know, actually it ties into the overall message I have of tapping into your sensitivity. And I've done a couple entries about this, but I actually wanted to do like a more in-depth entry about this. You know, I've done a lot of entries about the differences between logic and emotion, the axes of perception, you know, a concept that I coined, where basically there is an aspect of existence, you can say, that isn't really fixable. It's not really fixable by words or concept, right? And there are many kind of ways that this manifests, right? This manifests in, you know, our subjective, you know, perception, our subjective kind of like condition. You can call it state, like our state of energy within, you know. And just like the way that the world moves, like there's kind of like this component of the way that the world works that you can't really describe, right? But it's observable, but you can't really describe it in words, right? And as soon as you describe it, you fall into a pitfall, right? And I did an entry about that, you know, humanity is a pitfall species because we're so fixated on logic. It's very easy for us to fall into a pitfall and stay there because, like, we're not aware, we're not flexible enough by being sensitive in, you know, to energy, of like, you know, the kind of like sometimes very paradoxical nature of existence, right? But basically, my realization tied into the idea that, well, the idea that basically your state is very important, right? The way that you feel is very important. I did another entry, which I encourage you to watch, as with my other ones, entitled Consult Your Feelings, right? And in this entry, I talked about basically how a lot of the times, you know, because we're so mental and abstract, like we try to enforce, basically, plan for and then enforce a certain outcome that we want in life. And basically what happens is like we kind of attack it like very aggressively, and we set plans and we set schedules and we try and get it done. But then at the same time, we introduce this kind of stress in our body, you know, in our feeling, right? Because we're essentially going against our feelings sometimes. So and a lot of the times because, you know, if we're insensitive to energy, we're not able to sense whether or not something is actually good for us, you know, versus like what someone else has said is good for us, or like what is supposedly good for us, like on a head level, because there's so many things that claim to be good for us, but then when we actually try it, it may not be, right? And you have to be sensitive to your feeling, you know, to your body, to be able to, you know, feel that, to, you know, be able to discern, you know, between a good and a bad thing. And this is always changing. And again, this is like why it's, you know, it's so kind of ineffable. Like this horizontal axis of perception, energy, right? It's motion, right? You can't fix it. But anyway, in line with that, it's very easy to fall into the pitfall, basically, of like going against, or like doing, like when you're doing something, right, you can either be doing it for a good reason or a bad reason, right? This is another video that I did about light motivation and shadow motivation, right? Light motivation being a motivation, i.e. a state of energy or feeling within you when you do something or when you think about something or whatever it is, that feels loving, that feels connected, that feels empowering, right? It doesn't feel icky. It doesn't feel like you have to force it, because at that point it's become a shadow motivation, right? And this is like the subtlety to it, right? At any time, there's the pitfall of like falling back into a shadow motivation, right? So basically, like if you're someone who has a passion, if you're someone who has something that they want to achieve in life that has like a positive, bigger vision to it, you will get to points where you basically, and it's not really, you can't really blame yourself for this, but like but you basically you start to do things for shadow motivations, right, so to speak. So what do I mean by this? Basically, the very thing I opened with, basically, like I started doing these, this kind of thing, like you can call it personal development, self-help, spirituality, whatever you want to call it, new age teaching, whatever, right? Guru. I started to kind of do this kind of thing from a place of like inspiration and love and connection, because like it was at the point of life when I started, I was very like passionate. I was like, for once in my life, I realized that I could do something that could actually help people. Like this was unheard of in life. Oh, my camera might be a bit weird. It might be a bit weird. Yeah. But anyway, hopefully it kind of turns out okay. Like I had never had that feeling before. Like I never had the feeling or the expectation of doing anything that I felt would give value to other people. Like it would always be, I could technically do something that was valuable, but like it would always be like from, the usual, pre-awakening, you could say, paradigm of like having to do it because like it's just a path that's been laid out for you, and you just do it, and other people tell you that it's good for like the world, right? And that kind of thing. But for the very first time that I could take responsibility and be able to feel the significance of what I could potentially do, that was the mindset and feeling that I had when I went into doing this kind of thing. So like initially I was very passionate, and like you could tell that like the content that I was giving out, although very like unrefined and like, because I was just starting out, it was from a place of love and passion and purpose, right? But then you do it for a while, right? And things happen in life, and like you start to become a bit jaded, like I was mentioning. You just go out into the world, and like you start to like, the negativity slowly takes you over, right? Let's throw another concept at you. Like, this isn't my concept, this is actually by Owen Cook from RSD, Tyler. He mentions the frog in the boiling water phenomenon, where basically, and I coined my own concept. This is the same concept, but I use different words. I said that basically, it's not explicitness that kills, it's subtlety, usually. Because subtlety happens, it creeps up on you, and before you know it, it strikes, right? Whereas explicitness, it's very obvious, right? So, like a frog that if you throw into a pan of boiling water, it just jumps out. If you put it into like lukewarm water and slowly heat it up gradually, it doesn't detect the relative change in temperature, so it slowly gets boiled to death without realizing, right? And this is actually a very freakishly like accurate, like kind of a paradigm that most people fall into, right? Kind of like a trap that most people fall into. And it happened to me. I started. It never really took a hold of me fully, because like I think it's just the nature of like the kind of thing I'm doing. And I think if you have like a very high purpose, then like it's actually difficult for you to like fall into that kind of a trap. But still, it's like you find yourself starting to force the things that you're making, right? You're no longer making it from this place of inspiration where you're happy to do it and you're excited. You're like, oh my God, I have so many ideas. I'm going to make this video. Oh, I had this other idea. I'm going to make this video tomorrow and I'm going to do this and I'm going to plan it out. And it's just this place of love and you know that what you're doing is fucking amazing, right? But then slowly over time, things happen and you've been doing it for a while and maybe the ideas start to dry up a bit, or your mind gets filled with other useless shit, and you start to find that it becomes harder to do these videos, for example, and you have to actually exert effort to have to come up with ideas or whatever, and before you know it, you're doing videos where you're trying to force yourself to to say something interesting or say something wise or with value, right? But I don't know, man. Honestly, that could make me sound like a hypocrite. But honestly, it's just something that I realized, right? So take it or leave it, kind of a thing. But it's very profound. Basically, over the past few days, I kind of something happened where I kind of was reunited with that passion I had of why I was doing, this, or anything that I'm doing, really, anything that I'm planning in the long term. It's not necessarily to have to do something. It's very subtle, basically. It's kind of a bit complicated to explain. But when you do something that's from you could say shadow motivation, where you're doing it for the sake of an outcome, you could say. This also overlaps with another RSD concept, actually. Well, it's not really their concept, but they talk about it in their videos, about high vibration versus low vibration. And low vibration is when you're kind of outcome dependent, and high vibration is when you're process orientated, right? Or you're state orientated. And what this means is basically what I'm saying, which is that when you find yourself doing something and you have the mindset where it's I just need to achieve this thing. I have to just achieve this outcome and then everything will work out for me. And once you find yourself in that paradigm, and you can also notice this by the way that you feel, because you'll start to detect that very shadowy thing of shadowy motivational thing where you're basically having to force yourself to do something, right? And it doesn't matter how noble the rationalization is, right? And it's very subtle because again, a lot of this rationalization was installed in there by you when you were in a higher vibrational space prior, and really had a very genuine meaning. But over time, the subtlety of it makes it so that that rationalization has become neurotic, right? And it's actually become something that is no longer aligned with your passion and your love, basically. And what happens is that when you're not operating from a space of love and passion, is that the things that you make aren't really going to help anyone, right? They're not going to be an accurate expression of who you are. Well, they're not going to be as powerful an expression of who you are. And also, yeah, it's just the value that you offer, from an external perspective, will start to diminish, right? And it's very it's just very uncanny the way that this works. It's because you think through it logically, and it's well, particularly when you're in a low vibrational space, it's well, no, it makes sense that if I keep doing this, it's gonna keep helping people. Not necessarily, right? If you begin to find yourself making content or whatever it is you're doing, providing a service, but you're doing it for the sake of an outcome, right? The quality suffers, right? You suffer, and and the whole process becomes very painful. It's yeah. Everything just starts to work against you, right? And it's because you've started to resist yourself, right? And coming out of this, really the bottom line is, is about state, is about energy, right? This is what I mean by sensitivity to energy, right? And, you know, I myself being a student, right, I teach this thing, but honestly, like, I'm almost kind of like teaching myself while I'm like teaching whoever's watching this. You know, I fall into traps, you know, it's okay. I don't beat myself up about it. You know, you fall into these traps, right? Yeah, but basically, like, at the end of the day, like, you know, basically, how you learn to recognize that, like, the quality of of your feeling, basically, the way that you feel, and whether what you're doing, your behavior and your actions and all of that stuff, the things that you associate and connect with in life, the way that they make you feel, you know, whether or not they're in alignment with, you know, your higher self, you know, spiritual people might say, which is just basically a fancy way of saying, like, whether it's something that you actually love, and what you love can change, right? You know, what you actually resonate with in the moment. You know, I talked about this in Consult Your Feelings, right? When we have too many abstract paradigms and concepts and ideas and procedures and approaches, and we're too aggressive with those, like, we failed, and we're insensitive to energy, we fail to, like, recognize that, like, what we need emotionally and in terms of sensitivity changes, right? You know, what we need changes over time, right? What you might need on one day may be completely different the next day, or like next year, or whatever, right? And so you come to realize that basically it's more important the state that you're in. You know, that's basically the better indicator of you know, whether or not what you're going to do is going to be of good quality, it's going to be a pleasant experience, and, you know, whether it's basically going to be something that is going to actually help, you know, existence, I guess you could say, help humanity. That is based on how you feel, right? It's an intelligence, you know, like I say, it's our feeling, and, you know, on, like, as a whole, you know, our energetic sensitivity, our feeling is a very archaic form of perception that we have, right? It's a form of perception that, you know, we share with animals, probably plants, probably microbial, like, organisms, you know, like, but, like, it's this intelligence that is very profound, and yet, like, is very ineffable, right? It's very, very elusive to the thinking mind. You can't pin it down, right? So, yes, basically, you know, I just spout a lot of BS to you, basically, like a lot of concepts that are words. But honestly, the take-home message to this, like the conclusion, the moral of the story to this is basically, come back to love, right? When you find yourself, you know, in that kind of icky feeling space of, like, doing things because you feel that you have to do them, take a step back and go back to, like, the way that you feel, right? Take a break, take a breather, you know, consult your feelings, like in the video, you know, and do something that is in alignment with how you feel in this moment, right? And do that, and give yourself space to tap back into that space of love, and then all will become clearer to you, right? Because, like, when you get into that you know, that low vibration, that kind of shadow motivation type of, you know, a paradigm, a mentality, then you basically develop tunnel vision, right? And you become so focused on this outcome that you forget the bigger picture, right? And, like, it becomes like the pitfall, basically. Like, the mind is, you know, humanity's pitfall, basically. The thinking mind. But yeah, but that's my message, basically. You know, like, spend some time tapping into your love, you know, revisit things that you love, you know. And I guess I'll give you this as well. I also wanted to talk about in this entry, like, addictions and escapism, because I've talked about those in the past, right? And, you know, they've kind of been from a very critical kind of, like, a point of view. But basically, I also did another entry where I talked about I talked about let's see what I talk about. Where I talked about it's basically the humanity is a pitfall species video about how the mind is our pitfall. I also talked about basically how one manifestation of this pitfall is that we basically, in moments of vulnerability and weakness and fear, particularly when we're very young, because as I say, a lot of these emotional issues come up, they get installed when we're very young, right? When we don't have, a fully developed capacity to think objectively, basically. They get installed within us, and basically when we get older, before we reach a level of emotional intelligence where we understand our emotional issues and all of that stuff, we actually consciously attack the symptoms of those problems, basically. And those those problems might be addictions. They might be an addiction to escapism, vicarious living. I think that's a big one for today's generation of people. Today's society of people is the escapism thing and living vicariously through media, And this is basically what happens with addictions and escapism, right? And how this manifested in my own life is that basically I had a realization where I kind of finally made peace with escapism, basically. And it's not the hardest thing in the world, right? Making peace is something you already love doing. But I stopped resisting it for once, and I recognized that the escapism itself, or whatever addictive behavior that you have, whatever addiction that you have, that isn't the problem, right? That's actually something that your body makes you do, that your body desires to escape from something else, right? Again, another one of my concepts is it's the thing behind the thing that's fueling the problem ultimately, right? It's the emotional state behind the action that's actually fueling the problem, not the action itself, or not the response itself, right? And so escapism and any kind of addiction is basically that, right? It's not the thing that you do. In fact, the escapism and addiction is actually your body's attempt at healing itself. Actually, that's what it is, right? So whenever you want to watch a video or play a video game or gamble or drink or take drugs or whatever it is, then it's your body trying to basically heal itself, right? It may not be the most productive thing you could be doing, it might actually be very destructive what you're doing, but it doesn't change the fact that you're doing that thing. It's you doing that thing is your body's attempt to heal itself, basically. In the same way that we try to attack these identities that we hold on to, but we ourselves subconsciously installed those identities when we were younger to help us cope with the trauma that basically traumatized us to create these identities when we were younger, right? So so basically, that's what I wanted to say about escapism and addiction, and it falls under the same category. Really, again, it goes back to my central teaching of tapping into your sensitivity, basically, becoming more sensitive to energy and to your feelings and needs and all of that stuff, right? Because it really is the secret to a happy life experience. Because honestly, nothing you do, this is the other, you could say, pitfall, is you can be charmed for your whole life by many things that promise you happiness, but honestly, in order to be happy, you have to learn how to be happy yourself, right? You have to learn how to generate your own state, and that's another pickup term from RSD. But like, you know, RSD, like from RSD, I learned, you know, that those guys taught me that pickup is one of like, you know, picking up girls is like one of like the most spiritual paths you can take, like at the moment anyway. Or at the very least, like, you know, they present it in that way, you know, they highlight that. Yeah, you know, you have to learn to be happy, right? And, you know, me saying that basically kind of like corrupts it, you know, like I mean, my message is to portray exactly that, you know. It is to tell you, like, you know, to be happy for yourself, right, by following your joy and all of that stuff. But like the joy itself is yours to cultivate on your own, right? So, and you know, you're not, you know, you can't expect yourself to like just generate it and be like, oh, now I feel loving, when you actually feel miserable. You know, you have to, again, tapping into your sensitivity, like I said, is twofold, right? You follow your joy, and then you go in the direction of your pain, right? You admit your pain. You don't try and like steamroll your pain and try and force yourself to be happy, right? You know, that's the you know, it's a very delicate process. It's a very beautiful process as well. But yeah, so getting quite dark. I'll wrap this up soon because like this is probably my longest video to date. But yeah, okay, so yeah, that's my message. You know, just tap into your sensitivity, you know, follow your joy. Notice when you feel the obligation start to set into your body, you know, when you stop operating from a space of like inspiration and love and motivation and flow to a space of like having to force it, you know, be mindful of that. You know, that's probably a signal that you need to back up and like just like reassess, you know, the situation a bit, and like, you know, tap back into that softness which first motivated you to do that thing, and draw inspiration from that. You know, and that's not to say that, you know, struggle and any of that stuff is bad. You know, if you watch any of my other videos, you know, and I don't think I'm the only one, honestly, but like, you know, once you develop this kind of open perspective that I have, it's like, you know, you realize that nothing is really good or bad. You know, I say this so many times in my videos. It really boils down to like whether or not it's useful in the moment, you know. And part of life is learning to be discerning in that way, you know. Part of life is tapping into your sensitivity, but part of life is also learning to be discerning, right? It's learning, you know, which level of thinking, or, you know, what problem needs what solution, right? And they can be completely different, right? So anyway, I'm going to wrap this very self-indulgent entry off. I apologize if I bored you or I just went off on a tangent. Incidentally, this is what I sound like when I just talk to myself on, I do vocal diary entries, I just talk to myself, and like, this probably has been the closest thing to that, actually. But anyway, I hope that, you know, I gave some value in this entry, and yeah, I will catch you in the next entry. Look forward to that. You know, stay passionate, stay loving. All right, peace out.